This video is one of a number that are about the various issues and challenges around stagecraft in Fringe work and Fringe festivals. And in this particular one, I'm getting a little bit nitty-gritty around props particularly. And I mentioned in another video the example of seeing a play which had somebody ironing, and what they actually had was a cable going down and just hanging down the ironing board, even though the iron was supposed to be hot. And it wasn't plugged in anywhere, it just was clearly to the audience, this is pretending to be an iron, but the iron is cold. You've probably seen shows sometimes where people are miming drinking out of a teacup, and clearly it's just cold water being poured in, it's never filled up properly, and yet somehow the piece itself is being done very naturalistically, and other props are being used as if they were real, somebody eating an apple for example. That can often happen around food as well, where clearly somebody says finished and they haven't finished the food looks cold, the food is fake, and so on. Now all of these things can be done differently. You can have surreal work, you can have minimalist work, but what you can't have unless it's intentional is inconsistent work. And so authenticity and truth is a big part of theatre. I remember talking to a theatre maker who's based in Brighton at the time, Alistair O'Loughlin from Prodigal Theatre, and that was all about truthfulness in theatre. Don't have an ironing board. Don't have an ironing board if it can't look like you're actually ironing on it, if you want realism in that particular piece. And if you're miming, and we can mime props, mime them really well. And use the skills of mime. Don't half-heartedly mime them, and don't have some things mimed and other props being used. It's just weird. Similarly, if you've got fight scenes, that's why we have fight training. You don't want to have half-hearted, unless it's kind of a comedy show, half-hearted fighting. If people fall, they need to fall properly and know how to fall. Now I might be saying the obvious here, but it's particularly around props that things tend to fall apart. The play is set in the 1970s, but the decor, some of it looks a bit 1980s. The particular mug that we're drinking from that play is just, hang on, that kind of looks like it was made quite recently. The historical piece, well yeah, that's a really nice kind of medieval jacket, but the shoes, they're just normal shoes. And audiences will suspend their disbelief, and they will be quite forgiving sometimes in some shows, but sometimes not if you're asking them to lean in to a very specific truth or reality. So you have to go through every prop, and in places like Edinburgh where there are pop-up venues, there's not a lot of time, you might not be able to bring your original props, you might be trying to find them in charity shops, is to make the decision, do we not use that prop? Do we have to remake the show around it because we can't get the prop that's going to give the truthfulness to this piece? And sometimes in that case less can be more. It's very much around costume, but particularly here it's around props. So if someone's writing, they need to write and they need to use a pen, but if actually what we want to show is they were writing a lot and we're symbolically mimicking them writing a lot, just by them writing in 3 seconds, and we might show that with lighting change, make that consistent. Don't then a bit later have somebody actually writing with ink. If somebody is using in a historical play a little inkwell, and then using a little stamp, to seal it, well, we need a proper wax seal if what we want is kind of naturalism and realism. So I think you have to ask yourself tough questions, and particularly up in the Edinburgh Fringe and places like that where under a lot of pressure, the group that's staying together can get very scratchy with each other. People take things personally, and it may well be somebody spent a lot of time getting that prop together or making something and it's just not working, and everybody needs to trust each other and be very open to the idea we might drop that altogether, not use it, or do things differently. And ego and kind of revenge and having your feelings hurt don't work under the sort of pressures that we have at the Edinburgh Fringe. Now I've seen that in some very, very big shows at the Edinburgh Fringe, not just small companies, but some big shows are also under that pressure. Some really big touring companies, but they've not necessarily been able to bring their whole team with them, and sometimes the cast can feel very alone up in Edinburgh, and a prop breaks and they have to try and find something else, and then what's bought in a charity shop or in a flea market isn't quite what we wanted. We have to be very, very clear about decisions we're making. If somebody's wearing gloves, they need to be the gloves of the era that this thing is set in, and not look like they've just been nabbed from Marks and Spencer. Things looking roughly like real isn't very good in Edinburgh. And I think I mentioned in another video, it's also because quite often in venues, audiences are already stretching their disbelief in the venue that they're in, a converted lecture room, a converted bar, the stage put up very quickly and not really being the right size for the manor house that we're setting this in. So, as I've kind of mentioned with other forms of stagecraft around set, I think start with the props. Do the rough thing about how necessary they are, if we can change the show or adapt it to not need those props. And certainly wherever there is inconsistency, wherever there's a feeling of a kind of flakiness around the authenticity, then we need to rethink those props and be prepared to be quite brutal with them.